In the deepest part of the sea stood the palace of the Sea King. And he had 6 daughters. They played in the garden all day long. Unlike the other princesses, the youngest was quiet and brooding. And her name was the Little Mermaid. Most of all, she loved listening to stories about the world of people. Traditionally, a mermaid could only rise to the surface for the first time in her 16th birthday. And now it's time to see the land and the youngest princess. She surfaced close to the ship, singing and music coming from the deck. This was the first time the princess saw the ship. In the cabin of the ship, the Little Mermaid noticed a handsome prince. For a long time she could not take her eyes off him. Suddenly, a violent storm began at sea. The prince's ship hit a rock and shattered into pieces. In complete darkness, lightning flashed, and the Little Mermaid saw the prince fall into the sea. She rescued him by bringing him ashore. Soon the prince was found by a girl passing by. When he woke up, he smiled at her and thanked her for saving her. The Little Mermaid became sad that the prince did not even know about her existence. She dived into the water and swam away. From her father's stories about people, the Little Mermaid knew that they considered the fishtail of mermaids to be ugly. Therefore, in order to please a person, one had to acquire 2 legs. The next day, the Little Mermaid went to the sea witch. The sorceress agreed to make a potion for her that would turn the fishtail into a pair of slender legs. The princess's gait would be graceful, but every step she took would bring unbearable pain. And if the prince married another, the Little Mermaid would turn into sea foam. In return, the witch wished to take her wonderful voice from the girl. The princess was ready for anything to be close to the prince, and she agreed. Having sailed to the prince's palace at night, the Little Mermaid drank a magic drink. A sharp pain shot through her and she passed out. Waking up in the afternoon, the girl saw the prince in front of her, and lowering her eyes, found 2 legs instead of a fishtail. The prince tried to find out who she was and how she got here, but the Little Mermaid could not speak. Despite her airy gait and beautiful dancing, she felt terrible pain in her legs. The prince became more and more attached to the Little Mermaid, but still treated her like a cute little child. It never entered his head to make her his wife. Once the prince admitted that his heart is occupied by the one who saved him long ago on the shore, and they are going to get married. The Little Mermaid was very upset, but could not tell him the truth. When it was time for the wedding, the prince invited the Little Mermaid to go with the newlyweds on a honeymoon trip. A luxurious honeymoon tent is spread out on the deck of the ship. The Little Mermaid had one last evening left to be with the one for whom she left her home, gave her wonderful voice and endured endless torment every day. But he didn't even notice them. When silence fell on the ship, the Little Mermaid sat on the deck and waited for the first rays of the sun. Suddenly, near the ship, she noticed her sisters. They tearfully asked the witch to help save the princess from death. The sorceress gave them a sharp knife, with which the Little Mermaid was to pierce the heart of the prince. A drop of his blood would turn her legs into a tail, and she could return to the sea. The Little Mermaid looked into the tent, and saw there a sleeping couple in love. She did not find the strength to take the prince's life, and threw the dagger into the sea. With grief, the Little Mermaid threw herself into the water. But the kindness of the princess melted the heart of the wicked witch. The sorceress cancelled her spell, and the Little Mermaid again had a fishtail instead of human legs.
On a small farm, in dense thickets of burdock, the mother duck found a cozy place to build her nest. She waited for the chicks to hatch. One sunny morning, the eggshells crackled and tiny fluffy ducklings were born. There was only one egg left, the largest one that did not want to crack. The duck began to worry that something was wrong with him. She sat down on the egg again and decided to wait a little longer. The duck mom gave all the heat she could. She thought that this chick must be the most beautiful since she has been incubating him for so long. Soon a chick hatched from the last egg, but it did not look like the rest of the ducklings at all. It was much larger, and its feathers were gray. The duck mom was upset to see such an ugly son. But she hoped that someday he would become like his fellows. The rest of the ducklings laughed at him. They considered him disgusting and did not want to play with him. The next morning, the mother duck went with her children to the lake. To her surprise, the ugly duckling swam as well as others. The duck then brought her little ones to the poultry yard to introduce them to society. She told the ducklings about the rules of behavior with local inhabitants. The duck presented its brood to the noblest fat drake, but he attacked the ugly duckling, and she was forced to protect her failed chick. Fat Drake ordered to drive the freak out of the yard. Mother assured that he would grow up and become like other ducklings. Unable to withstand the bullying and humiliation, the ugly duckling left the poultry yard. In search of a safer place, he came across a beautiful lake, on which there was no one. And the duckling decided to stay here to live. Time has passed. Despite his loneliness, the ugly duckling was happy that no one offends him. And then one day, a beautiful white bird with a long neck flew to his lake. The ugly duckling did not know what kind of bird it was, but he looked at it with admiration. He loved her with all his heart. How a duckling would like to be like this lovely white bird. Winter came and it started snowing. The ugly duckling saw white snow for the first time. He was delighted with this sight. But due to the fact that the winter was very snowy, it was very difficult for the duckling to find food. He had to walk around the neighborhood in search of food. He was cold and tired. So the ugly duckling got to the farmer's house. When the peasant saw a thin and unhappy chick, he felt sorry for him. The farmer decided that he would keep the duckling with him until he was fattened and matured. Spring has come. The owner took good care of the chick, and he grew up a lot. The duckling already needed a lot of space, and the farmer decided to release him to the lake. Standing on the shore of the lake, the ugly duckling looked at his reflection in the water. And he could not believe his eyes. He could not recognize himself, and thought that there was someone else behind him. And then the duckling realized that the wonderful bird in the reflection is himself. To celebrate, he thrashed and swam all over the lake from edge to edge. And suddenly he saw the same beautiful white bird with a long neck, which he had seen once before. The ugly duckling decided to swim closer to her. But the beautiful bird was not frightened, but on the contrary she smiled and winked, and together they swam across the lake. The ugly duckling couldn't believe his happiness. Passing by, a fat drake on the shore of the lake said that he had never seen such a beautiful young swan in his life. What was his surprise when he found out that the ugly duckling that he once drove from the poultry yard was a beautiful swan. It turns out that the ugly duckling was a swan from the very beginning. An egg accidentally fell into a duck's nest. And when the beautiful young swan returned home, then everyone in the poultry yard became very ashamed that they had once offended him because of his appearance.